I'm Tom Coughlin. I'm with the IEEE Consumer Electronics Society, and I'm here with Dr. Nasir Memon, who gave a very interesting talk today on authentication methods. One question I want to ask you is, it really is a back and forth in terms of trying to create something that's secure, and then the people who want to break that for whatever reason.
Sure.
Is there any effort towards creating some kind of standardization that might give you different feelings of security based upon either combinations or complexity, or anything of that sort, or is it kind of a fool's errand in that there's
So there are standardization based on the protocol, and then but they allow you to simply plug in whatever authentication technique that you may want to put in. I may be wrong, but as far as I'm aware, there's nothing that allows you to customize or sort of modulate the level of certainty as well, right? So, and no, I'm not aware of that. But I think things will go in that direction. Perhaps
maybe a need for that. Huh?
Right, I think there's a need for that. Yeah.
So in a lot of our consumer devices today, like phones or tablets, they use some sort of biometric authentication, maybe fingerprints or face recognition. Can you talk about just how secure that is?
So one of the problems with biometrics, I think, is the fact that they're typically not a secret.
Mm-hmm.
Some are harder to acquire as opposed to others. So your face is easy for anyone to capture.
Mm-hmm.
Iris a little bit harder, but the technology is getting there to capture them at a distance. But your veins, shape of your veins in your palms, etc., even a bit harder, right? So but they're more or less, they're not secrets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one issue. The second issue is that biometrics were mostly used in controlled environments when you're crossing a border, right? Or you're entering a secure building. So there's a guard standing there. So you can't be putting on masks and putting on fake gloves and things of that sort, right? So it's a controlled way in which your biometric is input. When you do it on a remote device, suddenly that goes away.
Right.
You don't know how the presentation is being made.
There's no supervision.
There's no, yeah. So these uncontrolled, unsupervised environments, spoofing suddenly starts becoming real, right? And if one has to spoof every individual separately, then the cost is high. And in that case, the threat model is, well, if it's a nation state wanting to do it, then yes, it's a problem. But for a typical consumer, that's not an issue. So maybe that sort of threat is, it is there, but it's kind of, the risk is low and the threat is not really very realistic.
How about two-factor authentication?
So that is essential, I think, right? I mean, that is, I think biometric itself quite often is used along with the secret. Now, if you look at some of the consumer devices like smartphones which are using fingerprints, some of the more commonly used ones have not gotten rid of the pin. You still have to enter the pin, right? And so in some sense, the biometric there is becoming is sort of a re-authentication where you've had the phone and 5 minutes later you want to authenticate again. There's no need to go through an elaborate process if the fingerprint is quick and easy. But when you restart the phone, or perhaps, in my opinion, it should be done more often, every few hours of idleness or something, a secret is needed, the pin is needed, right? So in that sense, it's kind of still two-factor, right? Because it's not that it has been already unlocked with the pin for the fingerprint to work.
Okay.
Right. But biometrics, the security experts typically advise against using only a biometric, but biometric along with the secret.
Well, sometimes they will try to contact another device which you own, and you have to enter a code that's delivered there. So is that more secure? Generally?
Sure, right? Because now the attacker has to be able to do more in order to fake the authentication.
So, the technology keeps developing in terms of being able to make be able to emulate reality in a sense. And some of this is, might be usable in a security type environment, like 3D printing someone's
Right,
face.
right.
Trying to, maybe.
I know, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so is there any end to this, or is it kind of a continuous cat and mouse
That's
game?
the security is the
Yeah.
cat and mouse game.
Right.
So
Yeah.
security is, as people say, it's a process. It's not simply a technology that you can invent and then forget about forever. There's always an adversary, and the adversary will try to sort of circumvent whatever technology you have. And yeah, it's a never-ending process.
So if you want to give advice to a designer on trying to make a device as easy to use but as secure as possible, what would you advise them to do?
I would say it, designers sometimes tend to overestimate security and underestimate usability, or some go the other way, they underestimate usability and security.
Right.
I would say think about the right balance for your application, right? Right. Every application has a right balance, and there is no mathematical sort of way to arrive at it, right? But knowledge of the field and knowledge of the your consumer, knowledge of the user, knowledge of the device, etc. The designer should try to get from the rest of the team in order to find the right balance. I think the balance is important. People tend to go either too much this way or the other way. Yeah.
One last question. Just a thought, but a way of creating something that would be hard to replicate in a sense, or until you figure out what's going on, is to create an artificial person that you essentially use for your login. It's not you, but it's something you create, a synthetic biometrics of some kind that you can emulate.
And not just one, but maybe multiple.
Maybe multiple. So you use them on different days or whatever.
Yeah. So, I've thought about this. So the idea, in some sense, has been around in the name of pseudonyms.
Right. Yep.
So you have multiple usernames, things like that, multiple identities. But now, as you're going into biometrics, now suddenly, what is a pseudonym, right? Because
it's like an artificial fingerprint or something.
Yes. So I was thinking actually of creating. Not gloves. So gloves you'd have to wear. So I thought I'd create something, a cover for the phone.
Oh, for the phone. Oh.
And then that makes the transformation.
And if you don't have that thing, you won't be
able
to.
So so things of that sort.
That could be really interesting.
Right. But I have not done it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Panasonic.